Shocking facts about medieval food you never suspected. Imagine sitting down to a feast where peacocks are served with their feathers still attached, where bread serves as your plate, and where the spices on your food cost more than the house you live in. Welcome to the surprising world of medieval dining, where nothing is quite what you'd expect. Forget everything you think you know about the Dark Ages and their supposedly bland, rotten food. The reality of medieval cuisine will shock you to your core. What if I told you that medieval nobles ate more colorfully and extravagantly than most modern celebrities? Or that their dining etiquette would make our fanciest restaurants look primitive? Let's journey back to a time when food wasn't just sustenance. It was spectacle, status, and sometimes even art. Point 1. Luxurious dishes that will shock you. The medieval feast was a theatrical performance as much as a meal. Picture this: a massive castle hall illuminated by hundreds of candles, with smoke rising from the hearths and tapestries adorning stone walls. At the center of it all stands the ultimate medieval status symbol, a roasted peacock, carefully skinned before cooking, then dressed again in its magnificent feathers after being cooked to perfection. Yes, you heard that right. They would remove the skin with feathers intact, cook the bird, then sew it back into its colorful plumage for presentation. This wasn't just food. This was edible performance art designed to dazzle guests. And peacocks weren't the only birds getting the royal treatment. Swans, considered royal property in many regions, would be prepared with similar theatrical flair for the most prestigious occasions. The medieval elite didn't just eat food, they consumed spectacle. But perhaps the most surprising luxury wasn't meat at all, but spices. In an age before refrigeration, pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and ginger weren't just flavoring. They were worth their weight in gold. Literally, a pound of nutmeg could buy you 7 oxen in medieval Europe. These spices traveled thousands of miles along dangerous trade routes from Asia and Africa, changing hands dozens of times before reaching European tables. When a nobleman seasoned his food lavishly with these exotic spices, he wasn't just enhancing flavor, he was flaunting his extraordinary wealth. It would be like garnishing your dinner with diamond dust today. Then there were the sugar sculptures, called subtleties, that would appear between courses. Forget modern cake decorating. Medieval confectioners created entire edible tableaus depicting castles, ships, or biblical scenes. These weren't just desserts. They were statements of power and artistic prowess. Imagine the gasps as servants carried in a perfect sugar replica of the host's castle, complete with tiny sugar knights and ladies. The most elaborate feasts might feature live entertainment emerging from giant pies. Yes, the nursery rhyme about 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie has medieval origins. Though the birds weren't actually baked, they were placed inside after cooking, creating a magical moment when the pie was cut and birds flew out. For the truly extravagant host, nothing said luxury like a cockatrice, a mythical creature, created by sewing the front half of a roasted pig to the back half of a capon or turkey, often gilded with gold leaf. This chimeric dish wasn't just food. It was fantasy brought to life on a platter. And speaking of gold, yes, medieval nobles actually ate gold. Gold leaf was applied to special dishes, not just for visual effect, but because it was believed to have medicinal properties. Imagine consuming something so precious that most people would never hold it in their hands, let alone put it in their mouths. The medieval wine experience would put modern sommeliers to shame. And herbs to create what was called hippocras, a forerunner to modern mulled wine, but far more complex and costly. Wines weren't just served plain, but were often improved with honey, spices. For the truly adventurous drinker, there was clary, a sweet wine infused with herbs that was said to produce vivid dreams and visions when consumed. It was the medieval equivalent of a designer drug, available only to those who could afford its exotic ingredients. Even the vessels food was served in told a story of wealth and power. While peasants ate from wooden bowls, nobles dined using gold and silver plates, crystal glasses, and elaborately carved salt cellars that dominated the center of the table. The position of your seat relative to the salt cellar, above or below the salt, determined your social standing at the feast. It's where we get the expression, below the salt, to indicate someone of lower status. Point 2. Shocking facts about medieval eating habits. If you think using bread as a plate sounds primitive, wait until you learn about the sophisticated dining etiquette that surrounded it. The trencher, a thick slice of day-old bread cut into a square shape, wasn't just a makeshift plate. It was an integral part of the medieval dining experience. Imagine the bread slowly soaking up the juices and sauces from your meal, creating a delicious edible dish that would be either eaten at the end of the meal or given to the poor as an act of charity. This wasn't a sign of backwardness, but a practical and ingenious solution in an era before dishwashers. Perhaps the most surprising revelation about medieval drinking habits is that alcohol wasn't just for enjoyment, it was often safer than water. In a time before modern sanitation, water sources were frequently contaminated, especially in crowded towns and cities. Medieval people weren't stupid. They observed that those who drank from certain wells got sick, while those who drank beer and wine remained healthy. What they couldn't see were the microbes killed during the brewing and fermentation processes. The average medieval person might consume up to a gallon of ale per day, not because they were all alcoholics, but because it was literally the safest thing to drink. Even children drank small beer, a low-alcohol brew that provided hydration without the dangers of untreated water. The stark contrast between noble and common diets would shock modern sensibilities accustomed to more egalitarian food access. While lords feasted on exotic meats and spices, peasants subsisted primarily on what we would now call superfoods, whole grains, legumes, seasonal vegetables, and occasional meat. A peasant might eat a pound of bread daily, supplemented with pottage, a thick soup of vegetables and grains that simmered continuously over the hearth fire. New ingredients were simply added as needed, creating a perpetual stew that provided sustained nutrition. Contrary to popular belief, medieval people didn't eat rotten meat covered in spices to mask the taste. This persistent myth ignores the sophisticated preservation techniques they developed: smoking, salting, pickling, and drying. A well-stocked medieval larder contained food preserved to last through winter and lean times with remarkable effectiveness. The medieval approach to seasonal eating wasn't a trendy choice, but a necessity that shaped their entire relationship with food. Feast days punctuated periods of scarcity and fasting, creating a rhythm of abundance and restraint that modern nutritionists might actually approve of. The Catholic Church mandated fasting, abstaining from meat and animal products, for nearly half the days of the year, including Lent, Advent, and various saints' days. This wasn't just religious observance. It was an ingenious way to conserve food supplies and ensure sustainable consumption patterns. Medieval people didn't just eat differently, they conceptualized food differently, seeing it through a framework of humoral theory inherited from ancient Greek medicine. Every food was classified as hot or cold, wet or dry, and was believed to affect the body's four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. A balanced diet meant balancing these qualities, not counting calories or macronutrients. If you were of a hot temperament, you needed cooling foods to achieve balance. This sophisticated understanding of food as medicine would influence European dining for centuries. The medieval meal schedule would seem bizarre to us today. The main meal dinner was eaten around 10 or 11 in the morning, with a lighter supper in the early evening. This was not arbitrary, but aligned with daylight hours in a world before electric lighting made late-night dining practical. Perhaps most shocking to modern sensibilities would be the communal nature of medieval dining. Forks were rare luxuries until the late medieval period, so most people ate with knives and spoons, or more commonly, their fingers. Diners typically shared cups, trenchers, and serving dishes with those seated near them, creating an intimacy around food that our individualistic culture has largely lost. Even the seating arrangements at a medieval feast told a story of social hierarchy that would make modern diners uncomfortable. The lord sat at the high table on a dais, with guests arranged in descending order of importance. The further you sat from the lord, the lower your social status, a physical manifestation of medieval social structure that played out at every meal. Point 3. Unexpected cooking and preservation techniques. If you think our modern food preservation methods are impressive, the medieval techniques would leave you stunned with their ingenuity and effectiveness. Without refrigeration, medieval people developed preservation methods so sophisticated that they could keep food edible for months or even years. Meat preservation wasn't just about survival. It was an art form that required precise knowledge and skill. Smoking meat involved carefully controlling temperature and smoke density to create the perfect environment for preservation, while developing complex flavors that we still prize today in artisanal products. Salt wasn't just a seasoning, it was liquid gold, so valuable that the word salary comes from the Roman practice of paying soldiers with salt. Medieval salt preservation involved precise brining techniques that created a hostile environment for bacteria, while transforming the texture and flavor of foods in ways we now consider delicacies. Think prosciutto, gravlax, or salt cod preservation techniques perfected during medieval times. The medieval kitchen had no thermometers, no timers, and no precise measurements, yet cooks achieved remarkable consistency through sensory expertise. A master cook could tell the exact temperature of an oven by placing their arm inside and counting how many seconds they could endure the heat. They measured ingredients by eye, by handful, or by comparison to common objects, a skill that would leave most modern chefs helpless without their digital scales. Contrary to popular belief, medieval cooks didn't use spices to mask the taste of rotten meat. This persistent myth ignores both the effectiveness of their preservation techniques and the astronomical cost of spices. No one would waste precious pepper worth its weight in gold on meat that had gone bad. The real reason for heavy spicing was exactly the opposite. It was a way to show off wealth and sophistication. The more spices you could afford to use, the more important you appeared to your guests. Medieval cooks understood fermentation at a practical level centuries before we identified microbes under microscopes. They created complex fermented foods like garum, various cheeses, and fermented beverages that required careful control of environmental conditions. These were unhappy accidents, but the result of carefully guarded knowledge passed down through generations of food producers. The medieval approach to whole animal cooking would put modern nose-to-tail chefs to shame. And even bones were repeatedly boiled to extract every bit of nutrition. Nothing was wasted. Blood became puddings, Intestines became sausage casings. Heads were boiled for brawn. Feet went into aspic. This wasn't just frugality. It was a sophisticated culinary system that recognized the unique properties and flavors of each part of the animal. And saffron, mock fish from vegetables, and even counterfeit venison from carefully seasoned and shaped bean pastes. Medieval cooks were masters of illusion, creating mock dishes that transformed humble ingredients into spectacular presentations. During Lent, when meat was forbidden, they crafted fake eggs from almond milk. These weren't poor substitutes, but culinary achievements that showcased the cook's ingenuity and artistic skill. The medieval kitchen was surprisingly high-tech for its time, with specialized equipment designed for specific cooking tasks. Clockwork spits automatically rotated meat for even cooking. Ventilation systems managed smoke, and specialized ovens achieved different temperature zones for various cooking needs. A well-equipped castle kitchen was the medieval equivalent of a modern professional kitchen, with specialized tools for every task. Medieval cooks understood the chemistry of cooking at an intuitive level that modern science has only recently explained. They knew that certain pots' copper, iron, or clay would interact differently with foods and produce different results. They understood how acids like vinegar or verjuice could transform tough cuts of meat into tender delicacies through what we now call enzymatic breakdown. Perhaps most surprising to modern diners would be the medieval understanding of food as medicine. Every ingredient was classified according to its medicinal properties, and meals were often tailored to the diner's specific health needs. A person with a cold constitution might be served warming foods like ginger and cinnamon, while someone suffering from fever might receive cooling cucumber or lettuce. This wasn't superstition, but a sophisticated system that recognized the real effects of bioactive compounds in foods effects that modern nutritional science is only now rediscovering. The medieval kitchen was a place of constant innovation, not the stagnant, primitive space we often imagine. Cooks experimented with new ingredients as trade routes expanded, developed new techniques as technology improved, and created new dishes to satisfy the changing tastes of their patrons. The culinary manuscripts that survive from this period show a cuisine in constant evolution, adapting to new influences and opportunities with remarkable creativity. The shocking truth that changes everything. What if I told you that everything we think we know about medieval food is based on a fundamental misunderstanding? The most shocking revelation isn't about peacock presentations or bread plates. It is about how profoundly we've misinterpreted an entire era of culinary history. Modern historians have discovered that the Dark Ages weren't dark at all when it came to food. They were vibrant, innovative, and in many ways more sophisticated than our own approach to eating. The medieval relationship with food was unprimitive. It was holistic in ways we are only now beginning to rediscover. They understood food as medicine, as status, as art, and as community in an integrated way that our fragmented modern food culture has lost. What's truly shocking is that many of our current revolutionary food movements, farm-to-table, seasonal eating, nose-to-tail butchery, fermentation, and food preservation, aren't new innovations at all. They're rediscoveries of medieval wisdom that was nearly lost during industrialization. The greatest irony is that after centuries of progress, we now paying premium prices at high-end restaurants for dishes that would be instantly recognizable to a medieval peasant or cook. Our artisanal sourdough, craft beer, charcuterie boards, and bone broths aren't innovations. They're returns to medieval techniques that worked perfectly for centuries. Perhaps the most profound lesson from medieval food culture isn't about specific dishes or techniques, but about their integrated approach to sustainability. Nothing was wasted, everything had a purpose, and the entire system operated within the natural limits of seasonal availability and regional resources. As we face modern challenges of climate change and food security, the medieval approach to food offers surprising wisdom that feels startlingly relevant. The next time you sit down to a meal, remember that the echoes of medieval dining practices surround you, from the bread on your table to the spices in your cabinet. What we've dismissed as a primitive era of culinary history may actually hold the keys to a more sustainable, connected, and meaningful relationship with food. Perhaps the most shocking fact about medieval food isn't what they ate, but how much we still have to learn from them.